Hello and welcome to Tech for Non-Techies, the only podcast that demystifies the fast-growing technology sector. I'm your host, Sophia, Chicago-based MBA and tech entrepreneur. My aim here is to give you the skills, knowledge and confidence to find opportunities in the tech sector, whether that's through founding a company, getting a dream job, or bringing a fresh perspective to your work. Hello, smarty pants. How are you doing today? How was your week? I'm in that twilight zone of having excitement and fun so within reach that I can smell it, but it's not quite here yet. Next week, I'm going to Saint-Tropez with my friend as the French Riviera is finally reopening, as the vaccination program is on the way. I myself live in a beautiful place by the sea, and I'm literally only taking a short car ride. But like many of us, I really just need a change of scenery. And there will be new people, which is so exciting. I literally only have a few days of work left, and you know how it is before you go on vacation. Part of you just wants to check out. You don't want to do anything because you just want to go and have fun already. But there's this other part of you which is looking at your to-do list and thinking, how on earth am I going to get it all done? Maybe I should just cancel everything and just sit in front of my laptop forever. Obviously, I'm resisting this temptation. But before I'm off, I want to continue with part 2 of what we covered last week, and that's prototyping. A prototype is a key step in the life of a tech product. Like last week, I'm going to mention a few resources in this episode, and if you want to get a summary of them, just go to techfornontechies.co/design1. The link is in the show notes. So you will get the notes for this episode and for last week's episode. This means you won't have to stress and make notes now. You can just listen and absorb the learning. That's techfornontechies.co/design1 and also in the show notes. One of the most typical and expensive mistakes I see non-technical founders make is hiring developers before designers. So don't do that. Hire designers first. When you begin working with designers to turn your idea into reality, what you will be doing is making a prototype for your first product. Design sprints, which were originally developed by Google Ventures, are a really great way to make a prototype that behaves like a finished product without spending money and time on engineering, which is expensive. The aim of this process is to test a fake product among target users to see if there is enough demand to invest in creating the real thing. I went through this process myself. I've been through it a few times and I've written about it in Forbes. I'll send you the article along with the other resources that I mentioned if you sign up to techfornontechies.co/design1. But I want you to know that even the greatest prototype is usually very far from a plan that could be given to developers to code. That's because a prototype shows the basic tenets of a proposition, but it lacks the framework of a fully functional app or site. So, for example, an app prototype from a sprint is not going to contain screens like the settings screen where you can manage your account or designed to reset a forgotten password, because let's face it, they are important, but those are kind of hygiene factors rather than the things that are going to really make you want to use a product. Last week, we covered that before you start making a prototype, you first need to do user research. That means speaking to your target users. The aim of your UX research is to find out whether the problem you're solving really exists, and also to find out how your users are solving that problem right now. My advice is to do this extensively before you hire designers. The more you understand the users and the problem that they want to solve, the more you'll get out of the design process. So, for example, in the Stanford Entrepreneurship course taught by Steve Blank, they actually get people to speak to 100 target customers in 10 weeks before they start doing anything. So this is really extensive customer research, and that is a good aim to have. But once you've gathered answers to these questions, what do? You want to take those insights and then you want to turn them into a prototype and test them with target users. And now let's take an example that many of you know, and that's Tinder. The problem that the early team of Tinder was trying to solve was that people wanted to find new dates and they wanted to meet new people to date. The Tinder team also knew that we're all afraid of being rejected because, let's face it, rejection sucks. So what assumption would Tinder want to test in their first prototype? Have a think about that. So I'm going to answer right here. They would want to find out whether people were open to using an app to find dates. Remember, Tinder were the first big app innovation. There were other innovations people were using dating services before, but the dating app market was really born with them. So essentially, they would have wanted to find out whether people were open to using an app to find dates. The next logical step after figuring out what they wanted to test would be to design some screens for this app using prototyping software like InVision. They would design a prototype and then they would get that in front of target users. And the prototype would have profile screens that the target users could swipe on and a match screen to see how target users would react when they got a match. Once they tested that prototype and once they saw that people wanted to use this and that they were excited that they got a match, then it would make sense to take that prototype to engineering, but not before. And just an aside, I'm talking about the early days of Tinder because that's when they were making the first prototype, clearly. And these were the days before we knew that people didn't actually talk to each other when they got a match. And also that some weirdos are going to send unsolicited pictures of their penises via Tinder, which, is not a human behavior that I think anybody predicted. And just an aside, it does not work as an effective seduction technique. Send flowers instead. Just a thought. So to get from insights about users, which you have if you have been speaking to them, to having a tested prototype, you need to follow a process. So let's follow the Google Ventures Sprint method, which I mentioned earlier. And the Sprint method is outlined in the very useful book called Sprint, Solve Big Problems and Test New Ideas in Just 5 Days. The book literally takes you through a 5-day timetable. And that's what I'm going to summarize for you right now. But if you're going to follow this process, get the book and follow the timetable. So what is the timetable? First, on Monday, you will map out the problem and pick an important place to focus. You are ready to do this if you followed the steps from last week's episode. So you can go to Tuesday. On Tuesday, you'll sketch competing solutions on paper. So yes, that means that your designer will be sketching, but so will you. At this point, whoever is participating in the design process gets to draw. In my case, it was our community manager, it was me, and it was the design team. Whoever happens to be working with you, maybe it's some advisors, maybe it's some investors, maybe it's just you and the designer, but whoever is involved gets to draw, which is quite fun. The aim of this is to generate ideas about how to solve a problem and not to make great art. When I do this, and I've done this a few times, I literally draw stick people and my drawings look like those of a 5-year-old. But still, it works. It gets me to the aim. It gets me to day 3, and day 3 is Wednesday. On Wednesday, Google Ventures tells us you'll make difficult decisions and turn your ideas into testable hypotheses. What does that mean in practice? In practice, that means that you'll have all of these drawings and you'll have all of these ideas from smart people who understand the problem because they've been speaking to users. You'll still have too many different ideas for you to test. So you'll have to pick one that you are going to turn into a prototype to test. So on Wednesday, you are going to figure out which one of these ideas you are going to turn into a prototype. And on Thursday, you'll hammer out a high fidelity prototype. And this is where the designer does their magic. If you don't have a designer, you can just use prototyping software yourself. You can use InVision, Or you can use Bubble, which is a popular no-code app tool, which I have seen some of my students use with great effect. And then once you have this high fidelity prototype, you will get to Friday. On Friday, you are going to test this prototype with real live humans. And so first of all, literally in 5 days, you have a prototype. You have made a thing, which I think is really exciting. I remember when I first saw my prototype, I was so excited. You can finally see your ideas coming into fruition, and there's just really no other feeling in the world like that. But I just want to stop you here. Just because you have a thing, do not give it to developers. Do not give this prototype to developers. I literally wrote this in big letters in my notes for this podcast, so do not give this prototype to developers. What you are doing here is you have to test it with real live humans. And don't go crazy. You don't need big data. You don't need lots and lots of people. What you need to do is you need to test your prototype with 5 target users. Studies have shown that 4 users uncover 85% of the problems in your product. So it's cheaper to get feedback from 4 people and improve the product by 85% and test again and then improve by another 85%. I think in order to increase kind of the next 15%, you have to interview many, many, many more people, and that's far more expensive than just literally 4 user interviews that are 1 hour each. I say always book 5 people to test your prototype, because in my experience, 1 person always bails, because that's the world we live in. So if you want to have 4 users giving you feedback, book 5 user interviews for the Friday. So after you've tested the prototype with your target users, you're going to uncover errors. And this is where you need to go back and change the prototype. This is why we're testing the prototype. We're not testing the prototype to get told how amazing it is and that you're a genius. The prototype is going to have errors. People are not going to understand some screens. There are some things that people are not going to want. Even if the prototype is very, very good, even if in general people like the idea, there will be some things that need to be fixed. This was the case with my first company, with my first ever prototype. There was general kind of desire to solve this problem, but some of the screens were just incomprehensible. People literally didn't understand what they meant, which is why we needed to go back and change it. But it is way cheaper and easier to change the prototype than to change an app or a site that has already been coded. This is why this process is so important. There will be errors, there will be misunderstandings, there will be problems. You might even find out at this prototyping stage that all of the users say, I don't need this, I would not use this. This means that there is something wrong with the process. Either you have recruited the wrong target users, so you're targeting the wrong audience, or you're solving a problem that doesn't really exist. And if this is the case, this is going to suck. Honestly, this is going to suck. But it's better that you find out at this stage than when you have, for example, raised money or when you have spent money on developers. This is why you take this prototype, you test it, you look at the result honestly, and then very likely you will need to make another prototype and go through a slimmed version of this process again. You'll need to make another prototype, which means you will need to test it with 4 to 5 target users again. I remember when I worked with a design team to make my first prototype, it took us 2 tries to get it right before we gave the prototype to developers. This is fairly normal, so if this is happening to you, don't worry about it. Just budget that time and that money for at least 2 prototypes. If you follow the advice from this episode, you have literally saved yourself thousands of dollars. You're welcome. You could use a tested prototype also to get funding. So not only are you saving money, you could actually be bringing money in. So I used my tested prototype to get funding. And for the investors in this audience, if somebody shows you a prototype, you want to ask, did they test people? How many people did they test? who do they test? You're not looking for 100 prototype testers because that is going to be pointless. But if it's less than 4, and for example, if those 4 people were the founder's friends, that's not proper testing. If it's 4 people from the target audience and they all gave useful feedback, actually, that's relevant testing. The founder knows what they're doing. I have seen too many non-technical founders make expensive and entirely avoidable mistakes. And it's costly financially, but it also really dents your confidence. And when you're building something new, you just need all the help you can get on the confidence front. And I say this from experience. So, I am going to help you solve this problem. I'm teaching a free class on the top mistakes non-technical founders make and how to avoid them in early June. So if you found this episode relevant, you will want to come to this class. You can register on techfornontechies.co/free class, and the link is also in the show notes. If you're loving what you're learning, then come and join us as a member at Tech for Non-Techies. Our membership is your best friend in tech. Every week, we have live sessions and masterclasses. You also get monthly member meetups, Q&A with me, and learning notes on key aspects of technology like product management and the app economy and artificial intelligence. So what is not to like? Nothing. So check out techfornontechies.co/membership. And that's it for now, smart people. And I will speak to you when I'm back from Saint-Tropez next week. Have a fabulous day. Ciao.